Hey, what's going on? Great to see you here on Cinema Recap. Today we'll be talking about that 2004 thriller mystery called The Village. Spoilers ahead. Now to really set the tone, my boy M. Night starts with a funeral. A man's crying over a coffin, while the other funeral attendants watch awkwardly. I mean, what else are you supposed to do in that situation? But the gravestone informs us that inside the coffin is Daniel Nicholson, beloved son of August Nicholson. Furthermore, he was only 7 years old when he died. Now after the funeral proceedings, the townspeople come together for a meal outside. Suddenly, a terrible sound rises up from the forest. Instead of investigating, the townspeople keep their heads down and pretend not to notice. Now the whole town seems to follow strange rules. First off, they're deathly terrified of that forest, and even assign a man every night to keep watch over it. Not only that, but the color red is strictly prohibited. Anything red, from berries to flowers, is swiftly buried. One day, a teacher and a town elder named Edward Walker spot a group of children huddled up around something behind the schoolhouse. He rushes to investigate, because anything that attracts that much undivided attention from kids is not really ever a good sign. And it turns out to be a mutilated carcass of an animal. The fur has been stripped off and the head twisted back unnaturally. Later in class, Edward questions the kids on who might have committed this heinous act. The children eagerly reply that it was done by those we do not speak of, a group of meat-eating creatures who live in those woods. And bizarrely enough, Walker agrees. He reiterates the rules. The creatures don't come into their town, and the townspeople don't go into their forest. Alright, it's explaining the weirdness a little bit. They all are truly believing that an evil presence is lurking in the woods. Then again, if it does have a habit of leaving dead animals lying around, they're probably right to fear it. The village elders call a council meeting at the town hall, where August Nicholson is chair for the day. Suddenly, a young man walks in, requesting to speak with the elders. His name's Lucius, and he reads from a letter. He begins by saying that his mother Alice, who's on the council, was unaware of his visit. And then he explains that the passing of Daniel Nicholson from illness has weighed heavily on his mind, and thus, he asks for permission to travel through the forbidden woods to procure medicine from nearby towns. He continues stating that those we don't speak of won't harm him, because they'll be able to read his pure intentions. The council, however, doesn't seem particularly interested in what he has to say. And that night, Lucius joins Finton, who's on guard duty at the watchtower. He asks Finton if he ever thinks about other towns outside their boring little hamlet. But Finton's all like, they're wicked places with wicked people. A little judgy for a town that's got a flesh-eating monster on the loose. So the next morning, another skinned lamb is found in the field. Now the villagers are freaked out and call a meeting. Alice is trying to calm them down, suggesting that it's probably just a coyote or a wolf. Her calm manner puts the townsfolk at ease, even if her explanation doesn't make any sense. What kind of wolf actually skins a lamb and leaves it there? Her faulty reasoning continues as she states that those we don't speak of are larger creatures than coyotes. So if they'd breached the boundaries, someone would have seen. Sure, Alice, whatever you say, girl. Now after the meeting, a girl named Kitty tells her dad that she has a very important matter to discuss with him. Apparently, she's in love with Lucius and wants to marry him. Her father doesn't mind, but the only problem is that she's never actually spoken to Lucius before. With her father's blessing secured, Kitty heads out to tell Lucius the good news. She declares her love while he just looks on in confusion. Now, we don't hear what Lucius says, but judging from that look on his face, it's probably not what you wanted to hear. And the scene cuts to Kitty sobbing in bed as her sister tries to console her. Now, although the townsfolk aren't allowed to enter the forest, that doesn't mean that young men of the town aren't curious about it. They dare each other to stand in front of the woods at night, laughing until they hear a loud sound that makes them run back towards the safety of the lights. Meanwhile, Lucius helps out August Nicholson with chores around the house whenever he can. August still mourns the loss of his son, and so he mostly spends his days staring into that fireplace. He makes a cryptic remark, saying that sorrow is inescapable, and the camera pans to a box tucked underneath the staircase. Kitty's sister, Ivy, is close friends with another boy in town named Noah, who has an intellectual disability. Although Ivy's blind, she does make her way around just fine with her cane. They race through town, laughing, before coming to rest on a rock next to Lucius. Lucius doesn't speak, but Ivy can sense his presence while explaining that Some people give off a haze of color, the only thing she can see in the darkness. Nice. And she tells him about how much Kitty was crying the night before. But Lucius isn't reacting. He's generally pretty quiet and withdrawn, so Ivy leads the conversation. With Noah off chasing birds nearby, Ivy says that she knows why Lucius denied Kitty. Recalling that when they were younger, Lucius used to hold her arm while they walked, but one day had stopped. She takes that to mean that Lucius loves her, not Kitty. Lucius, true to form, doesn't reply. Noah comes back with a frog, placing them in Ivy's hands as they giggle. And Noah then pulls a stalk of berries from his pocket and into Ivy's hand. And she can only tell that they're berries, but Lucius solemnly informs her that they're red, the color that attracts those we don't speak of. Lucius has never seen these berries before, which can only mean that they are from the Forbidden Woods. Now Lucius pens another letter to read out in front of the town elders, explaining the berry incident and what he thinks it could mean. If Noah can enter the woods without being targeted by the creatures, then it only solidifies that Lucius might be able to pass through unharmed as well. So that night, after presenting his case to the elders, Alice tells Lucius what happened to his father when he left town to go to a market. And apparently his body was found in a river 2 days later. She only tells him this to protect him, so that he stops trying to leave town so badly. Lucius tells her that he can feel the secrets of everyone in town. Even Alice has a secret. And as he says this, he points to a box in the corner of the room. It looks exactly like the one August had under his staircase. Lucius wants her to open it, but Alice forbids it, claiming that the box contains evil things from her past. One day, while doing chores, Lucius is on the edge of the forest and decides to enter it. Inside, he finds red berries and picks off a stalk, when suddenly something growls in the nearby trees. Lucius quickly heads back to the safety of the village, but there's definitely something watching him in the woods. So that night, he finds Ivy in a field, who claims to be playing hide-and-seek with Noah. Remember, Ivy's blind, so we're not really sure how their game of hide-and-seek is working. Anyways, she informs Lucius that she's heard about his request to enter the forest, and while it is noble, she fears for his safety. On a lighter note, we find out that Kitty has found love yet again with a man named Christoph Crane. This time, however, the man returns her feelings, and they're gonna get married soon. Ivy coyly states that since her older sister is now spoken for, Ivy's now free to receive interest from anyone who's interested. And that's the closest thing you'll get to flirting in this old-timey town. Now back at the watchtower, Fenton hears a knock, and he opens up, expecting to see Lucius. Instead, a figure in a red cloak flashes past. He slams the entrance, scrambles to ring the town bell, signaling that those we don't speak of are here. The bell goes off, everyone in town loses their minds, people shouting, grabbing children, racing into their cellars for safety. Everyone except Lucius, who hides behind a house just as some creature walks past. Ivy, staring blankly out the open door as the rest of her family clambers in the cellar, can sense that Lucius is outside. Her sisters beg her to close the door, but she holds out a hand, hoping for Lucius to come. The red-cloaked figure gets closer, reaching its misshapen hands out to take Ivy's. But Lucius grabs it first, and he slams the door shut and drags Ivy down into the cellar. They hide inside all night as something slams on their front door again and again. Now the next morning, there are red slashes on every door in town, something that's never happened before. The elders call a meeting, and everyone crams into the town hall to discuss what's going to happen. Someone sent a note forward for the elders to read out loud. Turns out to be from Lucius, stating that he crossed the forbidden line into the woods a few days ago, which is what must have brought the monsters into the village. Lucius, sitting in the back row, bows his head in shame. But one of the elders, Edward, who also happens to be Ivy's father, forgives him. Soon after, it's Kitty's wedding day, and the whole town comes out to celebrate, all 50 people. But it's still a big occasion. And as they celebrate with an outdoor lunch, one of the town elders talks to Ivy. She tells her that she had a sister too once, but she was murdered in an alley outside their home, reiterating that the world outside their little town is full of evil. Weird conversation for such a happy occasion, but okay. The merrymaking continues all throughout the night, with everyone singing and dancing together until suddenly they hear children screaming. The music stops, and two young boys call for Edward. They tell him that they saw a creature in the darkness. Edward calls out to end the festivities, and they all head back to their houses in a line for safety. However, they find that more livestock had been taken and skinned, hung up on door frames, too far up for mere coyotes to have reached. What's the excuse now? And that night, Ivy jolts awake, sensing that Lucius is outside on her porch. She sits down next to him. And we find out that the elders will be interrogating everyone in the village tomorrow. And as they sit, Ivy confesses that she wishes she could play the game that the village boys play, where they turn their backs to the woods and see how long they can stand it before getting too scared. Lucius apparently holds the town record. She abruptly asks him if he'll dance with her when they're married. And the question embarrasses Lucius, but he confesses that he is on her porch because he fears for her safety above all others. Eventually, they kiss. Well, you know how gossip travels in this town, because by next day, everyone has already heard that Lucius and Ivy are to be engaged. Lucius opens the door and finds Noah on his porch. He's crying, and Lucius immediately knows that it's because he's heard about the engagement. Apparently, Noah has always loved Ivy romantically, but it was never reciprocated in the same way. And Lucius is trying to explain that to Noah when, suddenly, he looks down to find a dagger in his chest. Ivy comes out her house with Kitty when a woman rushes up and tells her that Noah was found with blood on his hands, but will not say whose it is. Ivy runs straight to Lucius's house, but can't feel his presence. The other villagers hear her scream and come rushing in. Inside, Lucius, unconscious, bleeding out, seconds away from death. He's carted to the doctors to be treated, while Noah is locked in a room to be interrogated. With Lucius gravely injured and close to death, Ivy asks for permission from the elders to travel through the woods to retrieve medicine. Edward asks the doctor if medicine can even help, but the doctor replies that if the wound's infection was contained, Lucius might be saved. Thus, the walkers have a big decision to make. Edward's wife reminds him that just like the other elders, he has taken a sacred oath to never leave their town. Therefore, there's no one who can go in Ivy's place. Edward meets with his daughter and begins to tell her the story of her grandfather. He was a good man, but he was killed in his sleep. Geez, every old person in this place has a horror story to tell. I'd be scared too if I lived here. And as he talks cryptically of leadership and trust, Edward guides Ivy to a shed that she's never been allowed to enter. And when he opens the door, he tells her to try and not scream. And then the scene cuts to Ivy packing her bags, and we never end up knowing what was in the shed. And while Edward tells the other elders that Ivy's going through the forest to find medicine, she heads to the edge of the woods, escorted by two men, Kristoff and Fenton. Ivy's calm enough, but the men are terrified. She tells them not to worry, as she's brought with her a bag of magic rocks, which help protect them. But Kristoff doesn't trust that. After all, where have these magic rocks been this whole time? He can't bear to continue and heads back. Fenton lasts a little longer, but after a few more minutes, he turns back too. Wow, you leave a blind girl alone in a forest? It's cold. Now with both men gone, Ivy dumps the magic rocks onto the ground, revealing that there's nothing magical about them. And the scene cuts back to Ivy being led inside the shed by her father. Nice. As she reaches her hand out into the darkness and feels long, misshapen fingers. She jumps back screaming, but Edward holds her close and tells her that it's fake. It's all fake. The only thing in the shed is a costume of a monster in a red cloak. There are no true creatures. Outside the shed, as Ivy tries to process this, her father tells her that the creatures were a lie, invented to keep the townspeople from leaving. The screaming, the ceremonies, the skinned animals, everything was invented by the elders. And with their secret now revealed, Edward directs Ivy on how to best navigate the forest. She'll have to follow the sound of a stream for a half a day, and will eventually reach a hidden road. Ivy heads off, and now it's Ed's job to tell the other elders that he's revealed their secret. Well, they're furious, but Edward is unrepentant. And we have Ivy going through the woods alone, getting on pretty well actually, despite the fact that she can't see a thing, but she uses her cane and hands to help her stay on the right course. And as she's walking, she's keeping a note of how to get back by memorizing the texture of particular trees and logs. And at one point, she almost falls into a ditch, but manages to heave herself up and keep going. Suddenly, she hears a snapping sound and realizes that something's watching her. Ivy runs as fast as she can, eventually finding herself in a field of red berries. Following her is a red-cloaked creature, and Ivy remembers her father mentioning that they took the idea from a creature of rumors that already existed in the area. That means that the monsters might be real, and one has found her. Oh man, It tries to grab her, but she slips out of its grasp and keeps running. She ends up brushing up against a log, the same log that she passed previously when she got out of the ditch, and suddenly gets an idea. Heart racing, she stands just in front of the ditch and waits. The creature rushes forward to tackle her, but at the last second, Ivy dodges and it falls into the hole. Meanwhile, back at the village, we find out that Noah had crawled out of prison through the floorboards, and in the process, found one of the red costumes. Which means, that's right, the creature following Ivy was Noah in a red cloak, and he dies there in the ditch. Ivy walks forward until the texture of the floor beneath her cane changes. She's found the hidden road. She takes off her cloak and runs on the road, coming to a wall covered in vines. Now back at the village, Edward unlocks that box from the beginning of the movie. Inside are newspaper clippings from their lives before they came to the village. All the elders are posing in modern clothing in front of a counseling center in some city. We find out that they all met there and together hatched up a plan to create a town away from civilization where crime and murder didn't exist. That's why all the elders have such sad stories about the people who died in their life. But what that also means is locking your way out of modern medicine and technology, you fall victim to easily curable illnesses, like August Nicholson's 7-year-old son. Now, meanwhile, Ivy has climbed up the wall and landed on the other side when a car pulls up. A security guard steps out and informs her that she's not allowed to be in Wildlife Preserve. She doesn't understand what he means or what a car is, but gives him the slip of paper with the required medicine on it. The security guard, whose name is Kevin, is very confused, but knows that the medicine she wants can be procured at a nearby station. He goes and gets it for her, and while he does, his boss reminds him of their duty. Now apparently, the wildlife sanctuary is paid for by one really rich guy, and their only job is to make sure that no one gets inside. Even government planes aren't allowed to fly over it. Ivy returns to town with the medicine, informing them that she was attacked by a creature but managed to kill it. Noah's parents realize that the creature was just their son in a costume and mourn quietly in their corner. Edward tells them that Noah's death, if they frame it as an attack by the creature, adds credence to their lie, which means that they can all continue to live in their little town forever. And that wraps it up. That was The Village, produced by Touchstone Pictures and features stars like Joaquin Phoenix, Bryce Dallas Howard, Sigourney Weaver, and William Hurt. Mr. Shyamalan is known for his crazy plot twists, and The Village is no exception. So, would you want to live in a place like the elders had created, or would you prefer to live on the other side with modern technology? Let us know in those comments with the hashtag Cinema Recap. Thanks for watching. Till next time.